This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reef Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
Crazy thing is you need them because everybody in our division's winning. So you reel off 9-10 in a row and you feel like you haven't gained ground on anybody. So just it's a testament to, the teams in our division. But it's, guys are doing the difference between right and wrong and what they need to be doing. And it's a pretty darn good collective effort right now from the boys.
It's a collective effort. It's one that's allowed them to win 10 in a row, feeling really good about their game. Unfortunately, all anybody could talk about, and that included us on the post-game show, was Brayden Point going down in the second. We're going to discuss that a little bit here, maybe a lot on this show. I am Greg Linnelli. It is Power Lunch on Lightning Radio. On the other end, our good friend Erik Erlendsson from lightninginsider.com. He's also part of our broadcast, which you can hear again tonight. Lightning taking on the Penguins. Mish going to be out for some personal stuff over the next couple of days. Always a pleasure to have you come in and kick butt and talk some good hockey. But, what is very interesting, I think last night it hits you a little bit how fragile things can be at times, where you can go from feeling really good about your game to, oh man, I hope that player is okay, because the win is nice. Brayden Point's health in the long run is more important, and hopefully it ends up not being as serious as it looked. It's something the Lightning have dealt with all season long, unfortunately, but you can understand if that was the talk after the game last night, instead of the Lightning really rolling and Jon Cooper getting his 600th career win.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw somebody come across my feed last night, and it said teams that can legitimately win the Stanley Cup. It listed Colorado, it listed Dallas, and it listed Tampa Bay with an asterisk. And that asterisk said, pending Brayden Point's injury situation. I mean, they've certainly dealt with their fair share of injuries this year. We fully expect that Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough and Emil Lilleberg will all return at some point. Right now, though, with Pointer, we know how important he is. We know how well he's been playing. I mean, you can't take a 50-goal scorer out of your lineup and think that you can find ways to fill the role. You can't. You just can't do it. I guess the good news, if you can find some silver lining, it's not good news, but silver lining in all of this is he did pop up right away, right? Like I went back and watched the video a few times from a couple different angles, and he does throw off the gloves and he does grab the knee real quickly, but there was no grimace of pain, right? Like there was no change of the facial expressions. And Brayden Point's probably a good poker player because his facial expressions don't change a lot except for when he scores emotional goals. He then was able to he put his weight on that right knee to get up to his knees, right? So there wasn't anything that caused him distress as he did that. And it doesn't look good, obviously, when you need help and you don't put any weight on the leg to go down the tunnel. And he got to the bench and he still needed some help to get down the hallway to the medical room. But, you did see a little bit of a video as he kind of turned. He was actually putting a little weight on the leg, which he wasn't doing on the ice. And, Ed Encina from the Times, who was at the game last night, said that Brayden Point was walking around after the game, did have a noticeable brace on the knee, but he hasn't been listed on IR yet. It's only 12 o'clock as we sit here and start the show. But they do have a game at 7 o'clock tonight. He'll probably get an initial diagnosis in Pittsburgh today and then fly back home with the team tonight before they head out to St. Louis on Thursday.
Sure.
So, if you're looking for silver linings that this may not be as bad as it looks, that's what I kind of deep dove into as I look back at the video of it. And,
Yeah,
hopefully it is just a mild situation rather than something that's going to be long-term, but
it's a
we
good
don't know.
point. It is one of those things, I think, too, where that initial reaction is pretty scary, I think, for everybody involved, because you're just not sure what's going on. And I
Yep.
think you don't want to read a ton into it, but that is a positive sign. And so you can't worry about things that you have no control over. So I think at this point, for a lot of Lightning fans, even the coaching staff, I think you prepare for tonight's game that Brayden Point's not going to be in the lineup. And you could tell when he went down, the Lightning's game changed.
Yep, for sure.
Flyers certainly pushed, and I think some of that was because the Lightning, maybe they weren't completely focused. That happens. But I think what they're hoping for eventually is that he does come back, whenever that is. And when he does come back, he can pick up where he left off, because I think we all can agree when Brayden Point is playing that way, they do become now a very, very difficult team, and their power play looks different. And there's also not as much pressure for Oliver Bjorkstrand to score goals. I mean, like, you want him to, obviously, but if Point is struggling, if other guys are in and out of the lineup, and you have Bjorkstrand who was brought in to do that, and he's slumping a little bit, you're going to be focusing more on that. But we weren't talking about Bjorkstrand as much because Point was playing really well. And now it's going to be an opportunity, you would think, at least for tonight, for sure, some guys to continue to carry the way and pick up the offensive flack like we've seen Gage Gonsalves do.
Yeah, the other part too is, like, the lines have been consistent and consistently good. Obviously, it's easy to say that when you've won 10 consecutive games, right? Something's working correctly. You're not lucking your way into 10 straight wins. But there had been some good, consistent play from all the lines.
Yeah.
Right. Point between Kucherov and Gonsalves has been a good line. Obviously, Gensel with Cirelli and Hagel has been good. We talk about the backpack line quite a bit, certainly on the post-game show last night. And even with James, Paul, and Bjorkstrand have put in some quality. And you look at the ice time, you can see what the coaching staff thinks of all those guys are basically getting, for the most part, between 10 and 12 minutes a night. So that tells you where the balance has been. So they found a good balance in their lines, and now that's going to be disrupted, and you have to find, ways to what you're going to do tonight. I would assume, at least for tonight, you just plug Jack Finley in. You need a right-hand shot center. It's nice to have a 6'6" right-hand shot center on your roster ready to go.
Yeah.
Every time Jack Finley has gotten into the lineup, it seems like he's made an impact in some way or some way, shape, or form. You move up probably Nick Paul. Maybe Nick Paul goes into, I don't know if he goes between Kucherov and Gonsalves, but, you kind of shuffle and Nick Paul goes into your top six. Even Dominic James could slot into the top six. He's done that a couple of times this year. But, you don't replace Brayden Points. You find ways to fill the holes and find ways to fill the roles, but nobody's going to take Brayden Point's spot, however long it is. We figure this is going to be short term. And then, of course, as Coop alluded to last night, there's a little bit of a tournament, a pretty big tournament that's coming up in a few weeks. We're less than a month away, or around a month away now, from Canada's first game against Czechia to start Olympic play. And Brayden Point has been one of those guys that was named early to that team. And he had starting to come on, and he made it clear last night that that's something that's in their mind. You can't control that. That's secondary to what he means to the Tampa Bay Lightning. But it is a big opportunity for players to play in the Olympics and be called an Olympian and compete for an Olympic medal. And if he misses out on that chance, that would be disappointing.
This is really where the conflict comes, I think, though, too, in terms of the actual NHL team that you play for and a player who is playing in a game or in a tournament that's not for your team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a good example. No, it's not the one where a guy goes and plays in the Olympics that gets hurt, and then you don't have him for the stretch run. This one is kind of touchy as well, maybe even more so, because the injury's fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And even if he does go, some would say, man, is he banged up still? Is he doing everything he can to go? And you understand playing for your country, or maybe we don't because we've never done it. So I take that back. But you certainly understand from people who have done it how much pride they have. But it always does come back to the priority should be the NHL team. And I know that's a tough one for players. I think more so for them than fans. You certainly want them to play in those opportunities, but you also know too, like in this instance, what if Julian and Jon Cooper, who are a big part of obviously Team Canada, I mean, how would they feel in a situation like that where you see a guy go down before the Olympics? He's trying to make it back to get to the Olympics, which is a big deal. How are you able to juggle the emotions of that, knowing that, the priority should be the NHL team, but there's some conflicting emotions there, isn't there?
There certainly is that part of it, and I agree with you. There is that confliction, but I think also because this is a guy who plays for Jon Cooper and plays for Julian Brisebois, they know the player better than anybody else.
Sure.
So they have the information to make these decisions more informed than anybody else could possibly be, right? They know Brayden Point inside and out. Having been around this organization as long as I have, and certainly with this group pretty much in place for the past 11 plus years, they will always err on the side of caution. They will not throw guys back out into the lineup simply because they're 70%. Right? So there is a balance there, but they will not forget about the Lightning's perspective and forget about Team Canada's perspective. They will not put Brayden Point in a situation to where he can damage his career longer. So even that aspect comes into play because they know the players so well inside and out. They know how he operates. They know how he thinks. They know how he works. They know how he deals with these situations, right? Brayden Point has missed time just this season due to injury, right? So there is certainly a balance to consider, and the priority should always be the NHL club because that's what you get paid to do. That's your job. The Olympics are great. You want them to be able to participate in it, but you're right. It is all about the team, the NHL team. But because I think they know him so well, I think that they will make the right decision, not just for Team Canada, not just for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but also for Brayden Point.
Yeah, I'm curious what our audience thinks too. If that changed your perception on whether or not you want Brayden Point or any player that gets banged up who has the potential to still play to go play, knowing that, keep in mind, and let's bring it back to the Flyers game. This is turning out to be, I think, the makings of something pretty special. Have no clue what's going to happen in terms of seeding. If the Lightning get into the playoffs, although we feel good that they will, you have to throw that out there because anything can happen. But the way they've just kind of moved and rolled along as if nothing has happened with all of these injuries, this does have the makings of a team that, some years it just clicks. You've heard the guys in the locker room, Chernak talked about it on the post-game show yesterday, that guys, they're playing really well. Guys know what their jobs are, and everybody's clicking. It's unusual to have that, particularly with all the injuries. And I'm just curious, you've covered this team for a long, long time. You've seen different teams, different coaches. Do you get the sense that this has the makings of something to be pretty special? And last night included, what is resonating more with you in terms of why we think that, beyond the injuries, because that's obviously a big component of it? What is making this so unique in many ways?
It's a good question. I think the way, coaches always look for ways to bring teams together. We know, probably compared to just to every other team sport, chemistry in hockey probably matters the most. And I know we cover this closely. We deal with the players. There's a little bit of bias there. But I believe that because of the way that the game is played and how fast and instinctual it has to be, you have to be on the same page with your teammates. So I think coaches look for reasons for that. I think back to John Tortorella. They would take side trips during the season, right? A couple of times they went to Atlantic City. John Tortorella would always say, I hope the guys get in some trouble, but just not too much trouble. Basically, he wanted them to kind of stand up for each other and have each other's backs.
Yes, right.
They would go on paintball games, right? They would play these competitive type of environments to put them in those situations to make guys work with each other. When Guy Boucher was here, he was huge on that type of stuff. They went to Quebec, not Mount Tremblay. It was just about 2 hours north of Montreal during training camp one year. And they had all these team bonding exercises. You know, you hear about the Florida Panthers going to West Point and what that means. Coaches are always looking for those situations. Sometimes you put them in these situations. Sometimes they happen organically. I think this year it's happened organically because of the injuries. Actually, I'll take that back. It goes all the way back to preseason. Those last 2 games against the Florida Panthers was a bonding situation. Everybody had everybody's back, right? I mean, you think of the fight that Darren Radish got into with AJ Greer, right? Declan Carlisle's getting into fights, and Max Crozier's getting into fights. Guys that, you know, Crozier spent a little bit of time here last year. Carlisle got a game or two, but for the most part, they weren't a part of this roster. They were there. They came together. Scott Saberin, who wasn't even part of the organization last year, knows what his role is. He goes out and does what he does to Aaron Ekblad. Got himself a 4-game suspension for it. But, you know, Elliot Friedman, when all that came out, the $100,000 organizational fine, the $25,000 fine to Jon Cooper, all the suspensions and everything else that came out of it, he said it best. He said the Lightning looked at that as an investment, right? Because it did bring everybody together. So I think that preseason situation, and then you now have the injuries on top of it to where you can't control the injuries, but you can control how you play. And I think that has brought this team together. And, you know, Jon Cooper even referenced it again last night because of how Philly was being a little bit more aggressive and maybe frustrated in the third period of that game, having lost twice to Tampa Bay in 3 days. And the other part is, too, is because of all the injuries, you've got, I think, a full buy-in from everybody. Whoever comes up, it's a full buy-in to how they want to play, to how they have to play defensive first hockey and understand that's how you're going to win games is defend. And again, going back to something John Tortorella said during the 2004 season, I'm not trying to make comparisons of where things are going to go, but just to kind of give you some insight, they got to a point in the second half of the year. Remember that 2004 team was kind of middling around beginning of January.
Yeah.
They had a great start. They were a 500 team by the time they got to January. All of a sudden they took off. They couldn't lose. I think they lost 3 regulation games for the remainder of the season, something like that. I'm probably a little off on my numbers. But he said they got to a point where all he had to do was open the door and let him play. I think that this team is close to that. All you got to do is open the door and let them play because they all believe in each other. They all have a buy-in to the process of what the coaching staff is looking for. So if you're looking for kind of comparisons and perspectives on previous teams that had success, those are some of the similarities I see in this team right now as we sit here on January 13th.
At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in that conversation, you can. Just, you know, before we get to some conversation with our audience, thoughts on the game. Last night we mentioned Brayden Point, but beyond that, you know, once again, Cooch doing Cooch things, and you know, collectively Pontus Holmberg with an opportunity there that's, you know, was exciting to get things going for the Lightning to make it 1-0. But what else did you take from the game last night? Another low shot total for an opponent going against the Lightning, which is fun, which is what you kind of were alluding to. Yeah,
and the Flyers play that kind of game too. You know, seems like it's a low event game. You know, I think I looked it up. They played 9 periods against the Flyers this year. Flyers only had double digits in shots once in those 3 games. So that commitment to defense is there. I think getting the goal early again, I think was big, right? Because the Flyers all right, we're coming out. We're not letting this happen. They only lost back-to-back games in regulation once all year. And you score 70 seconds into the game and the Flyers are chasing, right? But from Tampa Bay's perspective, you know, I know I kind of touched on it first intermission last night, but the Lightning adjusted to the Flyers' adjustments, right? The Flyers in the game on Saturday forechecked hard, came at them, forced the Lightning into some puck decisions, some poor puck decisions, created some turnovers, and made them play in their own zone for an extended period of time. Whereas last night, they didn't do as much dump and chase. And the Lightning adjusted to that. They, you could see early on the Flyers are trying to do a little bit more off the rush, try and make more plays off the rush than they certainly did in Saturday. And the Lightning adjusted to that. So it was almost a similar situation. Yeah. It was a 1-goal game after the first period on Saturday. It was a 1-goal game after the first period last night, right? The Lightning find an early goal in the second period. They kind of, put the pressure on the Flyers after that. And then after having to deal with the Point injury, you mentioned it, they sagged, right? Which is understandable to watch one of your best players have to leave the ice in that manner. But they settled themselves down, they calmed themselves down, and went out and played. It wasn't a clean shutdown third period, but it was a shutdown third period. They didn't allow much, didn't give the Flyers many scoring chances. And when they did, Jonas Johansson was there. So a lot of adjusting to adjustment, which is key, right? Especially you talk about playoff type scenarios, playing the same opponent in back-to-back games in the same building. The Lightning adjusted very well in game and between games.
Yeah. And I think also too, Jonas Johansson continues to really be a solid backup for this organization. And I know it may get overlooked because Vasi is going to play a decent amount of games. We know that. But I do think anytime you're winning games with your backup on the road, I always feel like that's a pretty big deal just because you're dealing with circumstances sometimes. And I think he's given his team an opportunity to win. And really, that's what you want your backup to do, don't you?
Yeah, give your team a chance to win. That's all you ask of the. And usually they're put into the back-to-back situation. So it was interesting that they went with Johansson in the front half, especially with the success that Vasilevsky's had through the years. You look at his numbers against the Flyers, including recently. He's been very good against the Flyers. Shut him out in the first meeting this year. Allowed the 2 goals on Saturday, and maybe because it would have been the third game against the Flyers. Maybe that's why they went the other way with it. But that's all you want. Can our goaltender give us the best chance, especially on nights where the team is not playing their best? I think back to the game in Washington. Johansson was outstanding in that game and gave them a chance to win, right? Like, he was spectacular in that game with some of the chances that the Capitals had. And we see that. Is he going to have to stand on his head every night? No. If he has to stand on his head every night, I don't know what kind of results you get, but he does his job on nights in which he's in net. And you can't ask for anything more from any goaltender, especially the guy in Johansson's situation, knowing, he might play once every 7-8 days. And it's not an easy adjustment. I remember when Evgeny Nabokov came here. They wanted Nabokov to be the backup to Ben Bishop when Vasilevsky first came over to North America. They wanted him to play games in Syracuse, and Nabokov was brought in to be a mentor to Vasilevsky as well as take some time. But Nabokov was a starter his entire career. He could not adjust to being the guy who played every 6 or 7 days. It's not an easy thing. And I think Johansson has learned that through his career. Would he like to be number one? Of course, every goaltender would like to be number one, but he's found a home here, and the Lightning have certainly rewarded him by extending the contract in the summer for 2 more years. And he's been great. He's done exactly what you ask.
For sure. At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation, you can. Jim emailed us, and it was specifically for you. He said, Eric, I know the Lightning have 11 players participating in the Olympics, other teams significantly less. I know the non-Olympians have the time off, but is there a plan for them to practice, or are the players allowed to play a game or two with their AHL affiliate? I know it will be tough for someone like Vasi to stay idle for nearly 3 weeks.
Well, guys who aren't eligible or have to go through waivers to play in the AHL can't play in the AHL. Yeah. And I don't know, like, I haven't studied the CBA enough to know whether, like, a Dominic James could go back. Right. I think he probably could, but we'll see when we get there. And maybe the Lightning say, look, you've played a lot of hockey coming from college to the pro. We'll give you the time off. But I think there are opportunities for guys who are on entry-level deals or who are not subject to waivers that they could go play in the AHL during this time off. The other part of it is that I don't know exactly how long the players who are not going to the Olympics will have off, but they will have off a significant amount of time. But there will be a date where they will have to come back to town and there'll be some practice days, similar to the Four Nations last year, right? It's a little bit of a less break this year or last year compared to what the Olympics are. Longer tournament, obviously. But there will be a time to where the players who are not participating will come back. And then the guys who do go, who maybe get knocked out in the quarterfinals or get knocked out in the first round, they will get some additional time off before they come back. And the guys, the odds of them not having somebody play for a gold medal is pretty slim when you have 11 players participating in the Olympics. That'll go all the way up to the Saturday before the season resumes. So those guys will probably get a little bit of extra time off as well as they make their way back. But to long win that answer, there is time off that they will be required to have. And then there'll be time when they come back, probably, I would say, about a week before the resumption of the season. I don't know that off the top of my head, but that's going off of similar previous years when there were Olympics. That's kind of how it worked.
I've got to think teams, for the most part, will welcome the break because we've seen a lot of guys banged up and injuries. Maybe it's one last chance to reset too, kind of see where your team is, and maybe you do get a few practices. We know coaches like to do that and make sure everybody's kind of buttoned up. I know it's nice in theory to say, let's keep moving forward. Let's keep moving forward. We don't want any breaks in the action, but I don't know. I do feel at times we have talked about the Lightning, maybe some of the earlier exits the last couple of years, they've played a lot of hockey. Maybe they are beat up, and I don't know. With them, fresh legs might be a bigger deal than a younger team.
Well, and even the guys who are going over the Olympics, right? You're guaranteed to play no more than 6 games, right? It's 3 games in the seeding round. Basically, was the preliminary. The top 4 teams, the 3 group winners, and the top quote unquote wild card team will all get a bye to the quarterfinals. The rest of the teams will play to get into the quarterfinals. So you're not playing anymore. I guess technically some teams could play 7 if they get all the way to the gold medal game, bronze medal game. But so that's not an inordinate amount of extra games over a basically 3-week period, right? It's not like the schedule the guys are going through now where they're playing 16 games in 30 days or whatever it is. So it'll be, some of it will be high level hockey, some of it will not be high level hockey. So it won't be necessarily as taxing as you think it could be, right? Until you get, I think, to the elimination rounds. So it's fun for me. I love the Olympics. I love the fact that the players participate in the Olympics. It makes for great entertainment value. But I think a lot of players, especially the ones who aren't going, will take the rest because it's been a compacted schedule. And guess what? March is the most compacted schedule. So they'll take the rest.
No doubt about that. And let's get to some more questions. I've also heard the argument, particularly older players, they don't like as much time off and they like to keep going because
rhythm.
Yeah, the rhythm. So I understand that. I just think collectively, I do think it's better than continuing to play as much as they have. Thomas says, when will player safety start stepping in? Seems like every team is headhunting us. What do you think, E?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I mean, it's no secret that teams have tried to intimidate the Lightning a lot through the years, especially recently as they've won. And I don't think they realize, again, how it's kind of brought the team together and how they'll stand up for time. I mean, look, we've seen Jake Gensel get into a fight this year. We've seen, even last night, Gensel didn't like the little cross check that Konechny gave him, so he slashed him. Right. So you're seeing teams are trying to get in the Lightning's head. I other than the games against the Panthers, for the most part, I'm not sure I would classify it as headhunting. I would classify it as trying to get inside their heads physically. And the Lightning retaliated. They stood up for each other. So I don't know other than the games against the Panthers, I'm not sure what player safety could do because I don't think anything has crossed a line to where they have to get involved.
No doubt. It's hard to say that Thomas, the league, is going to step in. I just think maybe there's going to be more eyeballs on games where tempers are flaring a little bit. And, we've seen that with the Panthers to a degree. But I think a lot of it is, too, just the officiating on the ice is going to have to take control if they feel like things are getting a little bit out of control. I wish I could give you a better answer and say the league is monitoring every player that is going high on the Lightning and they're issuing letters. No, they're not going to do that. I think, again, control what you can control. And I think the officiating can be a bit better on the ice when those things are going on. Thaw345 says, double E time, baby. That's right. We always love it when E is with us. Espo Con 99. I think that would be the name, Can never replace Pointer, but I like the idea of Bjorkstrand taking some reps in the bumper on the power play. I think he has tools to be effective and dangerous from there. I would agree with that.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. The question is, will that happen?
Right? Well, it did last night, right? Because they had that power play late in the second where Hagel scored. Bjorkstrand was in the bumper, and it was Hagel that went out to the left circle to replace Bjorkstrand, right? So we did see that, and Hagel ends up scoring the goal. It's a different look. You don't have a righty over on that side, but we know they don't have many righties in the lineup right now to play over there. But when Bjorkstrand has had success on the power play in this league, it has been from that spot. His best asset is the wrist shot, right? He's not a slap guy, not a slap shot guy. He's not a one-timer guy. And, I mean, we've certainly seen that this season. He's kind of gotten a little bit better in trying to one-time some wrist shots. But his strength is that wrist shot, and that's what Pointer's strength is too. Pointer scored a ton of his power play goals with that quick, accurate shot from that spot. And I think Bjorkstrand has that in him as well. So, yeah, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Depending on what's going on with Brayden Point, again, we don't know exactly what the injury is or how much time he will miss. We don't expect him to play tonight for sure. But I think you've already seen that, and I think we'll continue to see that if Brayden Point's not available.
At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in that conversation, you can. But I do think, has Bjorkstrand played better? Julian mentioned he's really liked his 5-on-5 game. It's not something that I'm watching terribly closely. I'm really looking for, are you getting looks and are you burying them? And maybe that's too simple of a way to look at a player like Bjorkstrand. But if we start getting into how's his 5-on-5 play looking, to me, that probably means he's not doing what he was brought in to do.
Right. He was brought in to be a 20-goal scorer.
Right. So that's, you can tell all you want. By the way, he's a minus player.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's metrics they're looking at. And I appreciate that. I am looking at how many goals you are scoring. Are you a threat? Yeah. And really, you get paid to be an offensive guy. Now, the 5-on-5 stuff is gravy. That becomes a lot easier for me to digest if I know he's also scoring 25 goals. And I can say, boy, he's 5-on-5 play. He's been really good, but he's really scoring. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It is what it is. It's just one of those. It'd be like a defensive player on the back end saying, he's just not. He's giving up a lot of odd man rushes. He's backing up. He's not been as good defensively, but boy, he's getting his shots through. All right, it is what it is.
Yeah, I haven't looked at his 5-on-5 numbers. They're probably not great. He's not producing. And look, he's been playing more of a fourth line role of late, which is not something you would have expected for a guy you brought in to be a 20-goal scorer, right? I would say I think I've seen him more involved, especially on the forecheck, right? The fact that he was the guy who kind of stood up for Pointer last night when Cam York took him down on the injury.
For sure.
I mean, that tells you that, he's invested, right? Sometimes you can tell if guys are invested or not. And we don't think of Bjorkstrand as that type of a player, right? He's a nice player. He's a good player. He's a Lady Byng candidate type of player. So we don't expect to see that necessarily from Bjorkstrand. So it was nice to see him invested in that aspect of it. But yeah, he's just, you need to see the production. He's paid to produce, and he hasn't produced.
And it's there. I mean, I don't, this is where you give veterans the benefit of the doubt that they've done it for a number of years, that eventually they will. And if they don't, I think you have to reevaluate it at the end and say, was this just a bad year? Was this an off year? Or was this the start of a decline? And I don't know. The other thing too, is I think the price you pay a little bit to get a player like that, you're going to have more patience. Mm-hmm. That being said, Julian's going to do whatever he needs to do to win.
Yep.
And he's not going to sit pat. If he's looking at this and saying, I just don't think it's working here, there, in my opinion, there will be a move that has to be made. Understanding you have to be cap compliant. I get that. But Julian has found a way along, with his team to be able to do those things and maneuver appropriately. Yeah. But let's hope Bjorkstrand gets it going.
Yeah, I'd like to see it happen.
Yeah.
I think we all would. So
I agree. Stephanie says, Erik Erlendsson, king of spoons. I love that. How many spoons? Can you give us the backstory again of the spoons behind you?
Yeah, I'll pan it back a little bit.
Looks great. I mean, how many are there?
Even before me and my wife got married, she collected souvenir spoons. So that's what those are.
Wow.
I picked some up along my travels throughout the years with the paper, and would pick up here, every there. When we go travel places, we usually look for, there's a couple of spoons there from Iceland. Our trip to New England a couple years ago, there's some spoons up there. And the one in particular at the very top, not the cribbage board, but the other one over here, that is actually Prince Edward Island. That's an outline of Prince Edward Island. That's a spoon holder. So when I went up to do a story on Brad Richards, my wife came with me, and we spent a little time up in PEI. We found that at just a little yard sale, craft show, whatever, up in PEI. So they're just souvenir spoons that we've collected through the years of our travels and everything else. And, I'm a big souvenir guy. I got a lot of shirts from places I go to and everything else. My wife collects the spoons.
Do we have, what's the oldest spoon on that rack?
Oh, man.
Does it go back? That would be
probably goes back to when my wife was a kid.
That's
and you know me, Greg, I'm not young anymore.
But your wife is. See, that's how you have to strategically say that.
Eternally young.
I love it. Oh man, I love it. But that is pretty cool. Let's see here. Where do we go? Let's see. Question from Lucas. Goodness, my neighbor Lucas says, why can't we have a nice, easy win where teams don't want to put our players' heads through the glass and give everyone concussions? We were just kind of talking about this. Do you think they are collectively kind of looking at the Lightning and saying, all right, let's take our runs here when we can? Where does it stem from? Is it just they've got some players that annoy the other team? There's some chirping going on. And I mean, clearly this is why guys like Sabourin and Douglas were brought in part because there's been some silliness going on here.
Yeah. Well, success, first and foremost, the success the team has had over the past decade, right? It invites it, because if you want to play King of the Mountain, right? And the old playground game, King of the Mountain, it's kind of what that is a little bit. And the fact that, one of the things the Lightning have been known for during the success that they've had is they're a fast, skilled team. They built their entire roster around speed, skill, and hockey IQ. What other teams feel they lack is team toughness. So they feel that they can intimidate them. And that's where this stems from, I think, in a lot of ways. And, you look at last time, obviously Sabourin's on IR right now. Curtis Douglas was sent on to a conditioning assignment with Syracuse. So he's, with the crunch here for, at least the next couple of weeks, most likely. So they didn't have a lot of that in the lineup last night, but that's where the team toughness comes in. They stood up for each other. So teams think that they can intimidate the Lightning. I mean, this was an issue even for that 04 team. because, it was Marty St. Louis and Brad Richards and Dan Boyle and these highly skilled guys. They had Andre Waugh, but he didn't play a lot in the playoffs that year. Teams thought that they could intimidate the Lightning because they didn't have that perceived team toughness. And, team toughness is not Scott Sabourin. It helps, but team toughness is how can you stand up when teams try and do that to you? So they're being tested. There's no doubt. Are they trying to injure guys? I don't think outside of the Florida Panthers, they're intentionally trying to injure guys. I think they're trying to deliver hard hits, and some of them are right on a line, and maybe occasionally they cross it.
Yeah, I think that's the part that it's hard for a lot of people to conceptualize this notion that if you do have some players who their job is to protect, does it deter the other team from crossing and going over the line? It's one of the great debates, I think, in hockey, because for so long you felt like that's what was said and believed. The days of Marty McSorley, the Oilers teams protecting Gretzky, did that type of behavior, did their behavior as policemen protect Wayne Gretzky? How many potential hits to the head or blindside hits did they prevent just by being out there, and also just playing at a time maybe when things were different? Can you make a case that today's NHL is more dangerous because some of these things are out of the game, or there's less policing? I've told you before, I do think I've seen more hits, not only to the head, but blindside hits when your back is turned completely. How many times do we see that? Guys just take runs. Carter Verhaeghe comes to mind as a guy that we've seen a number of times. So the game, I think there's always a bit of violence, of course. I don't know if I believe that. If having guys out there who are quote unquote tough deters people from taking hits to the head or targeting your best players. And I do think to a degree, the way the game is played today is just as dangerous with some of the hits than it's ever been. I'm not sure what to make of it other than here we are. And the Lightning are one of many teams trying to navigate those waters game in and game out.
I think part of it is there's not enough deterrent. And whether you want to say that's on ice or whether that's off ice for player safety not stepping up. But, it's easy to blame player safety when they don't want to get involved. But guess who doesn't really want player safety to get involved? All 32 GMs in the league. They don't want to lose their players. And it's a lot of it has become nobody stands up for the player who is injured. It's all about, okay, this guy might get suspended, which means he might lose money. We can't have him lose money. The PA in particular is always going to stand up for the player who committed the act rather than the one who received the act. And so I don't think there's enough deterrent for players to not deliver those hits. Look, all we're going to do is look at the series this season between the Lightning and the Panthers. How many hits are like, really? Not even a penalty? Maybe he gets fined the next day. So we've seen certainly plenty of those involving the two Florida teams this year, but it's more than just that. I mean, I've seen other hits around the league that have been similar or worse than that go, unpenalized. And it's disappointing because, going back to your point about, in the earlier days of, the McSorley era of hockey, it certainly didn't stop guys from taking runs at Mario Lemieux. I mean, Lemieux had his wrists broken, right? It didn't stop guys from doing that. Now, Wayne Gretzky is Wayne Gretzky, and everybody knew that you didn't touch that guy. He was different. And Lemieux was 6'4". He was a big guy, right? He wasn't Wayne Gretzky in terms of his stature on the ice, but it didn't stop guys, right? Even in the 90s, it didn't stop guys from delivering, elbows to the heads and driving their head into the glass. Like, it doesn't stop it. Sure. The only way to stop, to me, is to have player safety and the league. It's almost like you have to have player safety not be run by a former player, right? And not have to sit there and listen to the 32 general managers try and dictate the way things are supposed to go. It almost has to be a pseudo-independent entity to deal with these things, because to me, the only way to deter it is to suspend guys longer, and you can't fine them any more than what you can because it's limited by the CBA. But to me, it's because the ice time and games are what players want. If you make them miss more time because of some of these hits, to me, that's about the only way you can really, really deter them from happening.
And, before we get to more questions, it's unique hockey is because you do allow a sort of aggression that is rather brutal, which is fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of physicalness, I think, allows certain types of behavior to be acceptable beyond just fighting. So you have this dilemma, I think, where you're trying to, I've always said this, it's a contradiction. You want to protect the players, but you allow fighting.
Bare knuckle fighting, by the way.
Yeah. And so I think that's the part that's tough, so in some ways, look, you could say this is what it is and you have to deal with it. Or you completely say you can't do any of this and you really crack down on it. And I just don't think that's going to happen.
Well, and to just quickly end the point, it's a part of the culture. And when guys like Steve Yzerman come out and say maybe it's time to get rid of fighting in hockey, and he gets absolutely vilified by anybody and everybody in the league, that shows you exactly how ingrained it is into the league. And in today's game, fighting doesn't stop those. Fighting is usually in retaliation. How many times we've seen a retaliation for a clean hit? You know, guys have to answer for a clean hit because they see their player. Because we're not used to seeing, certainly, Scott Stevens would never be able to make it in today's game with some of the hits that he delivered, right? And just brutal, vicious hits, knocking guys like Paul Correa unconscious on the ice.
Incredible.
But if a guy like Yzerman, who was so well respected for the way he played the game, and he had, his protectors on the ice as well, right? If he's going to come out and say, I mean, he was called a hypocrite.
Yeah.
He was called a hypocrite by a lot of people, where to me, there's not enough progressive thinking in the game to understand that maybe it has its place in the game still, but maybe it's time to start curbing it in the stage fights. And we're all going to be shocked when somebody gets brutally injured by a fight and say, how can we let this happen when we let this happen? But that's my opinion.
To Steve Yzerman's credit, he is one of a few players that when they do speak, though, he carries some cachet.
Absolutely,
he carries.
So for everybody to turn on him so quickly was surprising.
Which is surprising, but maybe disappointing. But maybe we expected
both. Yeah,
that's probably kind of where we are with it. K-Bay says, I feel so bad for Point. He was just getting his mojo back, and now this setback. But also, some of the Canadian fans are happy he may be injured for February. It makes me sick. Know this as I'm in Canada. Well, we just move on from that.
Yeah, again. Yeah, this silver lining again for those who have come in late is that Brayden Point was walking around after the game last night, had a brace on his knee, according to Ed Encina from the Times, who was up in Philadelphia. So there is some silver lining there.
Yeah.
For anybody to ever suggest that they're happy a player is injured, I don't have time for you.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Alan says, congrats to Coach Cooper, 600 wins. I hope Point's injury is not bad and he can be in the Olympics. This team has succeeded despite injuries to key players. The lack of national respect is ridiculous.
Well, they're considered a Stanley Cup favorite by a lot of people. Certainly, I think a lot of people now look at this team as the favorite in the East and the best team in the East right now, despite all the injuries. I think the no respect comes to Jon Cooper. We talked about it ad nauseum. He's only been nominated for the Jack Adams twice. And the first one was his first year when there were no expectations on him whatsoever. And the second time was when they set a then record or tied the record with 62 wins in the regular season. And you look at what he's done this year, in a year in which he reached 1,000 games coached, second fastest player or coach to ever get to 600 wins, just 3 games behind Scotty Bowman, which is what he did last night, picking up his 600th win. I think that's where some of the, you'd like to see a little more respect for the job Jon Cooper has done in an era and in a league where the shelf life on coaches is about 3 years. he's been here almost 13.
It's a good point. Carl says, I'd put Hags and Tony with Cooch, Gonzo with James and Gentz, keep third the same, and Finley on the fourth line with Paul and Bjorkstrand.
I can see it. Yeah. I could see that. Yeah, that makes sense. So we've certainly seen Kucherov play with Cirelli and Hagel this year and have been good together when they've been there. So I could see that. James has played with Gensel. At times this season, we talked about it, right? Two players who have high hockey IQs that you can see on the ice. You put them on the same line together, usually you can kind of make some good things happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case tonight. So that's a good point by Carl Sagan, who's probably not the real Carl Sagan.
Blab says the NHL has no business being at the Olympics. There is a debate for sure, both pro and con. I have been more on the side of I don't think you should stop your season to play in a tournament that doesn't impact the NHL season. These guys get paid to play in the NHL, and I believe that. I also am a realist to understand that the Olympics, this is in many ways a bargaining chip for the NHL, for the Players Association. They do want this, and I understand that. And I don't know if that's ever going to go away, even if you do see some injuries. I think this is something that the players want to do, and this is something the league is going to have to navigate. But the Four Nations, I wasn't a huge fan of that, and I spoke about that, and you did see some injuries from it. I also understand where the players are coming from the Olympics. Leaders get paid a lot of money to make these decisions, and you can kind of see where it is. This is almost kind of a compromise-y of where things are.
It's so easy to see both sides of the debate.
It is.
Right? It really is. And, you're going to lean one way or the other. Some people will be on the fence, but I think more people will lean one way or the other. I love the Olympics. I've been a huge Olympics fan going back to 1980. Yes, I was old enough to remember the 1980 Olympics and certainly what that meant for the sport of hockey in particular in this country. You look at some of the guys from that 96 World Cup of hockey team for Team USA, they were bred out of that 1980 team. So it has its place in sports. Now the Olympics has changed. It's no longer amateur athletes. These are all professionals in some capacity. Right. So I think that's where, the team sports have changed with the Olympics. And I understand why the NHL players would want that opportunity and have negotiated to get this opportunity, especially in this latest round of the CBA. But I'm a fan of it. I love seeing, look, that 2010 gold medal game between the US and Canada, it was great theater. It was great theater, especially since it took place in Vancouver. I, for one, like good stories and good theater. And for me, the Olympics is one of the best stages to make that happen.
Agreed. I agree wholeheartedly with that. And Chris says, I'm glad to hear the injury may not be as serious. Hopefully. He's talking about Brayden Point, of course. While I always want the Lightning to win, I think this core has earned the right to be selfish and go play for their country. It may be their only chance.
It's fair. I don't know if I would call it selfish because at the end of the day, like 2014, again, going back to the Stamkos injury, he wanted to play so badly in that tournament, right? And his scheduled return was right around the Olympics, right? And obviously that was a traumatic injury with the broken leg and everything that he had to deal with in the recovery. But if he had his druthers, he would have played. But the doctors are like, look, you need a little bit more time to recover. You need more time for the leg to heal and everything. So he could have been selfish and said he wanted to go, but he listened to the medical advice because I can tell you there were people on the Lightning who wanted Steven Stamkos to play in that Olympics because it would have gotten him back into somewhat game shape to be ready for the end of that season at 14. Right. And this year, I really think some of the thinking into the Victor Hedman situation was to give him the best opportunity to play for Team Sweden. He is anticipated to be back the first week of February. Hopefully he can get into the Stadium Series game for the Lightning. And there's 2 more games before the league breaks. But I think that was part of the timing of the surgery for him, was to give him the best opportunity to play for Team Sweden, but also play. And again, if he comes back February 3rd or February 5th, and then he's going to go play some games from Sweden, he'll be in a better situation returning to the Lightning than he would have been if he has to sit out that entire 3-week break.
Yeah. Very fair. Very fair. Spectre says, shout out Mad Max Crozier for an entertaining guilt against Grabinkin and showing us the boys can handle themselves in a physical game without Sabrin, Finley, and Douglas. Yeah, he was throwing some bombs, wasn't he?
Yep. He can stand up for himself. We've seen that a couple times, right? Again, going back to the preseason and all the shenanigans that took place in those final 2 preseason games. But that's that team toughness that we talk about. And look, Max is not the biggest guy, but he is more than willing to stand up for a teammate and stand up for himself, and not afraid to do what he did last night in what was a pretty long tilt, in terms of hockey fights.
I think the Lightning have some guys who can fight. Anthony Cirelli can fight. Brandon Hagel can fight.
Oh, Brayden Point can fight.
Yeah, absolutely. You know who else can fight? Nick Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Paul is underrated from that perspective. And yeah, you're right. Lilleberg certainly can hold his own.
Yep.
He's a tough kid. So they have some guys. It's just not always what they're called to do.
And like in today's game, you have to be able to do something more than that.
For sure. And I think we all agree from there. Let's get to maybe one more. Let's get to this question from Paul G. Dan Highnote deserves a lot of credit. It took a dozen or so games for whatever changes Highnote made to be embraced by the guys. It's a testament to the defensive system and structure without Heddy or Mac. What do you make of that, E? Giving credit to some of the coaches.
Dan Highnote is a great motivator, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Talk to that guy. You're ready to do anything for him. I don't know how many changes they've made to the actual system. There's tweaks. There's always tweaks here and there. I mean, look, I get to sit next to Chief for almost every single game, and there haven't been a ton of changes made to the system. I think they protect the middle of the ice a little bit better than they have in last year's. I think the back checkers are getting more involved, but they still allow some space coming across the blue line, which is one of the criticisms of Jeff Blashill over the past couple of years. So I think Dan Highnote has been a tremendous asset to this coaching staff, but I don't know that he came in and really made many changes to the system and the way that the team plays. I think that it's a credit to the players buying into the tweaks that were made for how things have gone. Hey, I saw 2 other questions that came across. I'll touch on real quick. Somebody was asking about an update on Ryan McDonagh. It's a moving target with McDonagh. Yeah. They've been trying to, as Jon Cooper said it a couple times, try and get him right. Yeah. Right. So obviously whatever was bothering him with the foot is still bothering him. They've tried different skates and everything else and inserts to try and get him right. We thought that maybe he'd be back by now. Now, when we asked Cooper about it, it's now they're hopeful that he comes back before the Olympics. So it's been a moving target and a timeline on Ryan McDonagh. He's not skating yet, so that's the first thing we'll look for. The other one, when this is an interesting question, somebody asked about the original 2004 Stanley Cup banner, which used to hang in the building. It was a unique one. It was the outline of the Stanley Cup, and it was kind of a diagram cut out, obviously replaced with a Thrall uniform. The last I saw, that banner was hanging at TGH Iceplex in Brandon. I haven't noticed it. I haven't looked for it lately, but that's the last place I've seen it. Sure. I don't know if it's still there, but it is still around.
Sweet. Love it. That's why we come to you, E. You've got the answers.
I try. I don't always have the answers. All you gotta do is just ask my wife about that.
Well, we're all in that same boat.
Well, hockey questions.
Hockey,
I have answers for hockey questions.
There's no doubt about that. Hockey and food. I like both. Yeah, what more can I say? All right. So tonight you'll be part of the broadcast, as you always are. Lightning and Penguins. This will be always an entertaining game between these two. And Brian Rust, I don't think he'll be in the lineup for Pittsburgh, which will be a big boost, I think, for Tampa Bay, knowing that Brayden Point most likely isn't going to be in the lineup either.
Well, you know who else is out too? Is Erik Karlsson. They actually put him on injured reserve.
Did that just come out today?
That came out this morning, yeah.
Yeah, and he's been playing a lot better than what he's had. So certainly some and so that means we're going to see a 6-5 game.
Yeah. Well, it's Silov's in net for Pittsburgh too. So
yeah,
you don't know what you're going to get.
We'll see how that plays out. But regardless, we'll be on the last call tonight as well. I think Chief will be back.
Chief is scheduled to be back. Yep. Look forward to that as always.
And Mitch will be calling the game with Espo tonight.
Yes, how about that?
So we're making that happen, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And then you and I will be on these airwaves tomorrow as well, live, noon to 1, breaking down the game.
I look forward to everything already. The next 24 hours will be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Great job, as always. Check out his work, lightninginsider.com. He'll be on with me tonight. Thanks to Steve Versnick as well, Jared Johnson, for helping put this broadcast on. And thanks to you for listening. We always appreciate you guys. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.